Good afternoon, everybody. This is Dan Franklin, and I'd like to welcome you to our January edition of our Dynamics SL educational webinar series. Today, we're going to be discussing Dynamics SL CU5 Cumulative Update 5. Welcome, everybody. Before we move into the main content, I just want to tell you a little bit about SIS. We were founded in 1996. Our headquarters are in Duluth, Georgia, which is just outside of Atlanta. We deliver business solutions that help project and service-driven companies unify business processes and applications across the enterprise, thus delivering better visibility and efficiency. We are full service with your Dynamics SL. We can do current state assessment. We can also do business process analysis of your current business processes. We can turn that into a requirements document and a fit gap analysis. And then from there, we can move it into doing custom software design, development, and deployment of a solution that will work for you, including we're fully staffed with custom application developers. We do both ERP and CRM implementations. We do not only Dynamics SL, but we also do Dynamics 365. We can handle rapid deployments, and we can do hub and spoke rollouts for larger companies. We have lots of both cloud and on-premise customers, so we're experienced in both environments. For this webinar, please make sure that you maximize your screen, and if you have any assistance where you're not able to hear us or see, please email at info@sisn.com. We will monitor that email address and get help to you as quickly as possible. There is a Q&A session at the end, so please type your questions into the GoToWebinar section. We will not be able to hear you. Your microphones are muted, and we will get to the questions at the end. For again, for optimal viewing, make sure you maximize the screen, go to full screen mode. And we are recording this webinar, and so a link will be sent out to all attendees. So what we're going to do now is shift over to Jeff Suen from Microsoft. He's going to take it from here and show us the new Microsoft Dynamics SL CU5. Here you go, Jeff.
Excellent, Dan. Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your busy days to learn about what's happening in the SO world. So I do appreciate that. So what are our topics? We're going to start from the beginning. As you probably have heard, this is a different way we've been doing here for the last, wow, what is it, 3 years now, is that we come out with cumulative updates currently twice a year. So we are going to talk about everything from what came out from the beginning to what just came out here weeks ago in CU5. So we'll kind of go through the features, give you a high level idea there. Then, because when I started this presentation 2 years ago, I had plenty of time, we are going to do a little bit of high-level topic about some functionality that I'll actually highlight during my demonstrations around Power BI, Power Apps, and Automate as a high level. We'll talk about, just to remind you about web apps and what those provide to you, and then we'll go into roadmap. So this presentation, which used to be very easy to get through, is getting harder and harder as we work on new features. And I was hoping to have some updates on what would be in CU6. So CU6 will be coming out in 6 months or so, but I don't have my final list together, but know that we are working on new features and hot fixes for CU6 already. So that same pattern that we've been doing will continue on here in 2021. So that's the good news. All right, so let's go through the features. Some of these you've probably heard, but the big item that was added initially with SL 2018 was the ability to add approvals. Why approvals? Well, the idea is that we want to segregate duties. Dan is the manager of our payables. Jeff is the data entry person, and we want to be able to split this up so that Jeff can do his data entry, but Dan can get a chance to review and approve the items before they actually get released. As we all know in the SL world, the best time to catch something and make an adjustment is before you release that batch. If you release that batch, obviously we're not a solution where you can go in and just erase things. We need accountability, trackability, of course. You want that in your solution. So it's not like we can go back and just make an adjustment. If we can actually look at the items, approve them and say, yep, they look good, and then move them forward, it's a less chance that we're going to have to make adjustments after the fact. So we built this idea on top of this. Voucher adjustment entry, what's the end goal? I need to pay somebody, I need to pay this vendor. Well, let's make sure it's okay to pay the vendor. So what changes? One, there's going to be a new option here. So when they go in and they try to release something, if you've turned on this feature, they will not be able to release their batches. It's going to say, oh, can't do it. You need to go ahead and submit this for approval because someone has decided to turn this on at your company. As a side note, of course, if you decide not to turn on this feature, obviously it will continue to work the way it does today for you, but this allows you to enable this real segregation of duty. The next is, okay, I'm Jeff, I'm the data entry person, I can go ahead, the only thing I can really do now is submit it for approval. So as I submit it for approval and I click on the finish button, the entire batch now goes into a new status called W, which means it is waiting. It's waiting to be reviewed. It could be approved, it could be rejected. You don't know, obviously, but it is waiting right now for someone to take a look at it. Now, how do we approve these things? There are actually 3 different ways that you can actually approve it. Number 1, the approver can actually, if you are inside of Dynamics SL, you can open up that batch that's in that W status. And if you have been set up as an approver, it will allow you to go in and start taking actions. Now, the way it's built is you can actually decide to go ahead and just go ahead and decide to approve or reject a specific document, or the way that I prefer is just at the header. Look at all the documents, but then just approve it once or reject it once in the header. You have that capabilities. As an approver, though, you have some decisions to make. So for example, only approvers can go in here and make the edits. So I can come in here and figure out, oh, look at line item number 2, look at that sub-account. That sub-account might be wrong. So I have a choice. Dan can go ahead and decide to make the adjustment, put the proper sub-account in, or he can reject it and send it back to Jeff as a learning mechanism for Jeff to say, oh, by the way, it was the wrong sub-account. Remember, we talked about it. You need to choose this different sub-account. So again, really based on your needs, how you handle this, but the approver has that ultimate capabilities. Then when it gets approved, you can either write a reason why it got approved or have it automatically populate this field for you. And now that it is in approved status, Jeff can now open it up and do what he usually does, releases it now, release later, whatever the next step that he has set up in the system. So that's the first way that someone can approve it. I said there are 3. The second way came in CU2, and this is a feature that's written through something called Power Automate, or as it was used to be called, Microsoft Flows. The idea behind this is that built into this Power Automate tool is the ability to automatically email people at certain times of the day when there are items that need their approvals. Again, this email that you're seeing being passed here that I'm highlighting in red, this is completely customizable. This is how it comes out of the box, but this means that if you take this Power Automate and you import it onto your own system, you are completely open to customize it. Make it look the way you want it, add additional fields that might be missing. But if Dan gets this email and it says, hey, by the way, Dan, here's the batch, here's the total amount, he goes, it's 125. Yep, those are people that we usually spend money with. I'm okay with that. He can choose to go ahead and actually approve it or reject it right inside of the email. He's on the road, he's somewhere else where he doesn't have access to the rich client. He can actually approve it right here inside of the email. So he can put that email approval information in there or rejection information and take action. Now, the nice thing about this tool is this Power Automated approval process is built inside of this tool. The benefit here is that as soon as we hit an action, whether we choose to approve or reject, automatically changes the status of our email. So our email no longer says, hey, Jeff, or Dan, you need to approve something. He knows quickly by looking at it, he's already taken an action. Here's the date and time that he took action on it. So it's great information that's stored automatically inside of it. Now, like anything in the world, there's always an app for that. So there's also an app for you to be able to view those things on your phone opposed to your email if you wanted to get more of an interactive. Again, you're seeing a lot of the same things, but again, being able to view it and take action on it in an app as well. So that's number 2. Number 3, what else? The third way, there's another solution that we talk about called Power Apps. These are all Microsoft tools, which is a great benefit that all seamlessly work together. This came around the fact that someone said, you know what, I know you're creating this new approvals and you're doing a lot of it online, which we like because that's where people live. We don't want to make them have to go into SL. But now that you're keeping track of all this information going through the approvals, we want to be able to view the history. So if somebody comes back and says, hey, how in the world did this thing get approved? We can actually go into an app where it shows us the batches and you can quickly see by drilling down who's the person who approved and rejected it. Now that's how it started, and then talking with people, they said, well, if you've got all this great data in here, why don't you add the ability to actually just approve or reject right inside of this application as well, which is what we've done. So let's quickly walk through what this solution does. Right now I'm taking a look at all the batches that are out there. I see that there are 2 that appear that I have the access to approve them. So we can click on them and drill down. When we drill down, we are seeing that history. We see that it was submitted for approval. It requires approval. You can see the different statuses and drill down. Now, this is a very simple one. It's one batch with one document. Now, that's not always very exactly how it's going to be, but obviously, if you had multiple documents in here, you could view them all, and you could also see where you are in that approval process. Does it need an approver from manager 1 here, and approver 2 is approver test 2. And we can see right now, no one has taken action on it. So I can go ahead and talk to those people. Now, again, they'll get an email, but I also say, hey, listen, you guys probably got an email. Can you go ahead and take action on this? Secondly, let's jump to another batch just as an example. And we can see that this one actually started to get approved. So it's been partially approved. So we just take a peek at that where we see that, yes, someone has approved it on this certain date and time. So we can really see that information about what's going on with this as well. And as I alluded to, along with being able to view the history, we can actually take action right on the screen. So these items that are waiting for approval, we actually happen to have ability to approve this. So we can go ahead and click on it. It just verifies that that's what we want to do. We say yes, and it automatically goes ahead and approves it. So just like we talked about with the email, this Power Apps, these are just 3 different ways you can do it, which really, as you can see, makes it much more expansive and accessible, sorry, is the word. More accessible, more people can do it. Doesn't have to be someone has to be inside of SL the whole time to do that. So that's kind of what we're doing there. Approval maintenance, there is a screen that you can set up the approvals. Here's the voucher adjustment entry screen. Just a couple things to note. We do set up the ability to set up either 1 or 2 levels of approval, or leave the whole thing off, Jeff. We don't want to do it, no problems there. And the other thing is that along with having 2 different approvers, you can set whether it's a group of people that are going to approve or a specific user. The big difference being if it's a group, this is a standard Microsoft Dynamics SL group. So it's the approvers group that you might set up. What it means is anybody, whoever gets to it first, quote unquote, wins, and they can approve it and move forward, and then it would go on to the second person. So you've got a lot of flexibility to set that up inside of here. So that's the bit, that was the really, really big one, which we'll talk about here in a second. There have been a lot of tweaks. I think that's kind of, some of those pictures are from the original version. There have been a lot of great feedback from customers and partners like SIS that gave some enhancements that we've made to it, which we've made to this. Some of the things that we've done is now when you go to open up the batch and you try to release it to different status, we've actually removed all the statuses except the submit for approval. So if you have to submit it for approval, well, then you don't need to look at release now and release later. Some enhancements to the approval processes, a lot of great feedback from people like yourself as customers and as SIS as partners to help us enhance that process. The next feature that we're talking about is our possible values list, our PV list. If you are on SL 2015, this upper section probably looks more familiar to you. If you're on SL 2011 or earlier, it might look a little foreign. Basically what this is, it is kind of our new quick query interface for lookup lists. The real big benefit of it is that we actually have a field that you can choose a drop down and choose, hey, I need to look inside my active customer lists for any customer whose name has the value ON. So that allows me, and this list updates on the fly. So it was a longer list before. I typed in ON, it shrinks down to only things that have ON. So it becomes more interactive and ability to find things. And that's based on the fact that in SL 2015, we came up with the idea of not searching with begins with a contains clause. Show me anywhere inside the field name that the value ON is contained. Now, people from the SL 2011 earlier group said, hey, it's always been begins with. I like having begins with, so if I wanted to find the first T entry inside of my customer list, I could type in T and do a begins with. So hopefully what you're seeing highlighted here is we added a box or radio buttons here that's highlighted in this red box that allows us to choose between the two. So you can switch back and forth on the fly, don't need to jump out of the screen. What we've added is the ability to say, well, when we open up the screen, for you, web user one, what do you like to see? Do you like to see a contains clause being defaulted or begins with? And this allows us to go ahead and set it. So great idea when it first came out, and you'll see later in my presentation, we've even enhanced this feature to make it even easier for the end users to use. Next is around printing invoices, preliminary and final invoices. The big thing that we added here, which we've actually just enhanced this here in CU5. The big item that's highlighted in red is the idea that when we print out invoices for projects and flexible billings, a lot of times we're printing out multiple. And in that case, sometimes it takes a while to print things out to printers because they have to get queued up and do all those things. And a lot of people today, we don't generally need things to be printed out. So we have the ability to output this to a folder, maybe a local folder on our machine, to a DocShare/SharePoint site that we've set up for our manager or for the project that we're working on. So think about it. I have 3 different projects that I'm printing invoices out. It'll create, in that one case, you could set up to create 3 different folders for each of those projects, throw the preliminary or final invoices in there, let people review it, take action, and move forward without you having to take the time to save it, put it somewhere, do all those things. It's automatic and it allows you to take advantage of that functionality. Next is a feature for our financials. The idea that I want to have a vendor, but I want to make them inactive. So this is some of the CU1 things that were added. So customers have been able to be inactive forever. We had in vendors the ability to make them kind of on a hold status, but it was kind of light as far as what you could do with it. Now, we didn't want to remove hold because some people might find hold to be very valuable. It limited certain things, but we wanted to do something a little more restrictive. So inactive did the following. It means that if you set a vendor to inactive, it means there's no new purchase orders that can be created for them. So literally, if Jeff is our vendor today and we are in a situation where we need to stop, no more POs, we can make that change to inactive and he no longer can create a PO. But here's the other things. No new vouchers can be entered against him and no checks can be cut for him because he is inactive. That's big, but it's also very powerful because it allows us to really shut things down when we're in a situation where something's going wrong to a fact that needs that. Now, what it means to them, the end user, is that means that these vendors stop showing up in their lookup lists, and that's kind of how that works. Now, if you try to make a vendor inactive, we will generally let you do it. There's a couple situations. One, if you happen to have a purchase order that's open, we're going to warn you. By the way, we're going to allow you to make them inactive, but that vendor has, in this case, 5 purchase orders sitting out there that are going to be kind of stuck. Think about it. Maybe you want to go back and review them. Now, there are some cases where we won't let you make them inactive. It's very limited, but basically, if in this case, if you're using inventory and you've set up a vendor to be a primary vendor for an inventory item, we're not going to let you get rid of them unless you go and remove them for the inventory. Or you're going to remove them if you had them as a vendor to subcontracts. So obviously that would remove them from that list. That's going to really mess things up. So you need to make sure you think about that before you make them inactive. Where does this change? Oh, just a few places. So all of these different screens inside of Dynamics SL will react to you making them inactive. Now, the last thing I want to say before I leave the inactive idea is that making a vendor inactive does not do anything about, deleting their past history or anything or getting rid of anything. It literally is something that we see that you stop any future work with them, but we don't automatically do anything. We don't get rid of their history. And into the fact that if they're inactive and something happens and we work it out with them in the next day or so and we want to bid them back to being active, it is just as easy as going back in and making them active again. So it's not getting ready, it's not a bad thing. If we need to hold them up for a reason, go ahead and make them inactive because you can quickly turn them back around once things are cleared up. All right, so the next are a couple additional project items that happened in CU1. The first was a request around time and expense entry. Specifically, when you're doing expense entry, a lot of times we have situations where people are using web apps and they're going ahead and putting their time, or in this case, expense in, and they're being asked, hey, you need to make sure you include all of your attachments for your receipts. Now, in a perfect world, everybody does it. In a perfect world, when the manager comes in to approve it, they make sure that all the attachments are there and it goes through. So when a expense report used to get to a certain status that it's been approved, we would lock down the ability to enable it to allow you to add or look or change any of the attachments. So what we've done is we've made it so these fields are always active. The goal here is that as an accounting person, if you find out that they have not put their receipts in here, we're making these fields always inactive for you as an accounting user so that you can reach out to Jeff and say, Jeff, we do need your receipts. Please provide them. They can take it, attach it, and now you've got it. The next thing is a feature that's been around for a while, but we have updated it here in 2018. It was the ability to actually view a website inside of Dynamics SL. If you clicked on the home button and hit homepage, it would display any page that was set up inside of this your user maintenance screen or group maintenance screen. In this case, I am displaying the SL 2018 customer source page, so I can see that the latest information. Some people always ask me, how do I know the latest version? This SL directory kind of gives us the latest and greatest information. So there is a fact sheet on CU5, CU4, CU3, CU2, CU1, all those are out there under that directory, as well as to be able to access to get the download to start getting it installed. What we did here with 2018, why am I highlighting it? Basically is we updated so it would work with more modern web pages. So we make sure you wouldn't have any errors doing that functionality. And then we wanted to add some functionality. So this is how it's set up. It goes either into user maintenance or group, and it says, okay, here's when the sysadmin logs in, here's the web page we want to display. To make it easier for our admins to say, you know what, I want everyone to start using it. Web user 10 was saying, I'd really like to have my homepage be customer source, so you could set it up once, hit copy, and copy it to a specific group of people, set of users or a group of people, and it would allow you to do that. So just making that process easier to promote that feature. Now let's jump into CU2. One of the things that we talked about we talked with a bunch of consultants who work in Dynamics SL world, and we kind of wanted to add some new things to quick queries. If you haven't used quick queries in the past, definitely something, if maybe you're on an older version or you haven't used it recently, it definitely is the place to go to get great information out of your Dynamics SL data, great ways to search, find the things you need, get it, drill back to the details, get the information to answer a question, what it is. It's kind of, the modern reporting idea. And so what we did is we talked to some consultants who work, and one of the areas we talked to is a group that worked in the project area. And what we did is we sat down with them and said, hey, we know that you guys do consulting for our SL customers. What are some of those common quick queries that you end up deploying a lot at your customer sites? Because it helps you, but it also helps the customer kind of self-diagnose and self-understand how things are working or running in their system, so that it can be kind of a way for them to check on how things are going. And these are the 5 that we got from them. The first one is an allocation. So not to get too deep, but for our project people, you're probably very familiar with the allocator. The allocator allows us to take initial entries and reallocate them to other entries, and maybe it's something as simple allocations you would probably think on the general ledger sizes. We get the energy bill in, and in general ledger we can allocate it out to different companies. Similar idea, but usually on a grander scale here in the project world. So what's the first one? Allocation process analysis. This will say, okay, based on how you set your allocations up inside a project, if you were to run the allocator right now, what were the transactions that would be included? The benefit here, see what it's supposed to do, and if you start seeing some things missing that you think should be in there, well then go back and see why it's not coming over. 2, allocator transactions, after you run that allocation process, it's going to show you either the transactions that were the results or the transactions with billing with it as well. So you have the ability to see that. The next is the billing transaction load analysis. So it's going to go through and see what project transactions are eligible to be billed and then give you that information. And the last is a process called the financial transaction transfer process. This is analysis that says, again, if you're going to run this process, how would this impact your what should be impacted when you run the process? Again, a way to look at it, make sure things are set up the way that you would expect them to be. So some great queries, a great way that we're taking some things that consultants use a lot. Project is a hugely powerful thing, obviously, for Dynamics SL. It can be set up very simple or very complexly, and we feel that these tools and these queries are going to help you to make sure things are set up the way you expect them to be. The next, this is one that you'll hear me talk about once, but you'll hear me reference it multiple times, was a very simple request. I was on a phone call after doing a presentation very similar to what we're doing today, and someone came to me and said, hey, listen, I need a very simple thing, the release GL batch screen. There's a field there that would really help me understand if I want to release my batch. It's the period to post. So basically what they wanted to see is, show me what the period to post is for that batch. It's 06/2025, and they go, well, obviously that's not right. And so, okay, great, does that work for you? But then we were talking more, and I said, well, along with showing it to you, would it really help you out if I would allow you to actually make a change? And they said, even better. So we've made it so if you're in initialize mode and you open up the screen, you can look at all the batches at one time. You can go in and make an edit and change this back to the appropriate period that was set up for this particular database. Put the right period in there, hit the begin processing button, and boom. Without opening up the journal transaction screen, we can release all those batches, and you can see that this one has the right period to post, not that 2025, without me having to open it. So very simple idea at first that became powerful when we said, well, what else are you looking for? What would make it easier? And again, something that you'll hear me talk about, we've continued to use this type of idea going forward in other areas. The next is one near and dear to my heart. As a demonstration person, I have to demonstrate new features and functionality all the time. One of the areas that we work on is web apps, and web apps, most of the time I'm showing people how to do time and expense entry. And a feature of the time entry is that inside of SL, you have to set up something called week maintenance. Now, week maintenance, if you don't look above, just look at the grid below, basically it meant in the past I would have to go in and type in a week ending date, the period to post, time card period, and fiscal period, go to the next line, type them in. So if I was doing weekly, bi-weekly, semi-monthly, and whatever it was always, it takes time. You know, a lot of I've actually run into companies who only run this like the day before the month starts, so they don't have people going ahead. Very restrictive, but sometimes needed. And some people want to do it at the beginning of the year, let it run and not have to worry at all. The idea here is that instead of having to manually put it in, how about put some automation to this, which I greatly appreciate it. Now, what does that automation do? What it does is when you open up the screen, it looks at what the current last day of the period is. That's nothing to change, it's just letting you know it's Friday. You give it a start date, you give it an end date, you tell us what the time card period is, bi-weekly, daily, monthly, semi-monthly, weekly, and then you hit begin processing. Now, when I hit begin processing, it pops up a screen. It says, okay, based on what you just typed in, this is what I think you want me to enter into this screen. I can look at it, I can review it, I can edit it, I might need to change the salary factor because we're going over from one period to the next, so you have full flexibility. And when this looks good and I hit OK, it automatically adds it to the end of the weekly maintenance. So week maintenance is now hugely easier, and it's great for me because I can actually talk to a customer, say, what are you doing weekly, bi-weekly? I can set it whatever, and I'll just do that one next week, be able to demo it to them in a way that they can understand it, and then the next time, if it's weekly, I can change it to a weekly. So very, very flexible, great functionality, something that I am very happy that we have. The next is our end dates. Now, Dynamics SL project maintenance screen has always had a start date and an end date, but it's always been informational only. So the request came in and says, hey, can we actually have that end date do something for us? So if that end date is populated and you turn on this end date validation field, if I leave it at none, it does nothing. If I set it to the project level, what it will do is any project that if the date, when I'm doing my data entry is past that end date, that project will stop showing up in time and expense entry. Can't use it. Same at the task level. If I want to go to the task level and I want to set up a project with a task for every month, I can have it set up so that that task disappears and is not available at the end of the month. So great flexibility that allows you to really kind of lock down where people are putting their time and expenses. So again, that's kind of what I just said here in a detail level, but it gives you that high level. So the big deal here, where does this affect? This initial feature that we came out with in CU2 here was just for time entry, time card with rate amount entry, time detail, project timesheet entry with rate amount as well, and travel and expense. So all of these screens, if you're on CU2 or higher, you have that functionality built in. We also have 2018 web apps that also respects that change as well. So you've got a lot of functionality and flexibility there. The next was the ability to make the invoice and adjustment posting process a little more flexible. So what we added is that whole section in red. So you can see above, you could say my selection criteria was for a certain sub account or biller or cutoff date. But some people wanted to be able to say, well, I want to select just a certain set of projects that I want to run through here. So you could do that in the grid, or you had select invoice and adjustments that you want to run. So you have the flexibility to choose exactly what runs in the invoice and adjustment posting process. The next was an enhancement for our service series people. When you are doing a quote out of the box, what would happen when we chose a quote and we chose a specific customer, it would default in the site ID. And if a customer has multiple site IDs, sometimes you don't know exactly where you'll be doing your work. So if I chose the default and it turned out they were doing work in Delaware, well, I was kind of stuck. So what we did here with SL 2018 is we enabled that field, the site ID. As long as the status is a quote, you can change it as much as you like. So if I'm here and I want to change it to another address, so I can choose the another address, and it will allow me to change that as much as I need to while I'm doing my quote. Now it's still going to lock it down once we finally do the final and it goes out of the quote status, or quote handling, but while it's still in quote, it is enabled. Now on to CU3. We're getting closer. A great example here is an enhancement that came from our CU1 release or original release that came back and said, hey, I love the fact that I can set what my default is, whether it's begins with or contains, but you know what? I don't want to have my people that are in admin go in and have to set it up for me. I, as a user, want to be able to change that on the fly. So if today I feel this month, I think that the behavior contains is great, but then I start using it and I really like begins with, I can come into my standard open dialog options page, go under applications and choose which one I want, click OK, and it automatically updates it. Again, showing you how a great idea is made even better by customers and partners. The next is, we love the approval process so much, we've added it to the journal transaction screen. So that same bit of functionality, same ideas. Again, this is a little, again, there's only one entry per batch, but again, that same idea, I can do it here. If I try to submit it, it's going to tell me it needs to go through approval if I set it up. That whole process. So everything that I showed you at the very beginning of this presentation for AP, the same thing exists here. You can approve things right in the journal transaction screen. You can approve things through email. You can approve things through an application like we showed. All those things that I showed you are available here for journal transactions as well. And just to show you it is real, again, we see that the approval maintenance screen now has a new drop-down option for journal transactions. So again, taking those things that we were getting feedback on, all the enhancements that we made, and then continuing to move them out into other areas of the product. And here's another example of that. Everyone, I love the release GL batches functionality, said, why don't you add it to the AR batches screen? Done. Why don't you add it to the AP batches? Done. So same functionality, you can view the field, you can also edit it when you are in initialize mode. The next is building on top of what we did. People loved the end date validation. They loved the idea behind it. They wanted to extend it out until the financial area. So we have our AP, AR, and GL buttons that allow us to extend that functionality that when we get past that certain date, these things will start falling off. Key AP, AR, and GL screens, which is actually just 3 screens, one from each of those. Now, before I show you, just to say, some might say, but Jeff, you've always had the ability to make it inactive down here. That is true, but that requires you to remember to come in here at a later date and turn this off. The benefit here is that I can set a date when I want things to stop happening without having to come in and do maintenance on it. So same things as we talked about before. The screens that it impacts for GL is the journal transactions, the voucher adjustment entries, and the invoice and memo. Just those screens in there have we added that date validation, which allows you to limit exactly which projects, whether it's looking at it at a project level or looking at it at a task level. So some great additional functionality. You can see kind of a theme here. Again, once we see something and we get great feedback and we get great ideas, we continue to run with those. All right, we're getting close. CU4. CU4 came out back in May, June last year. What were the big things that we added to that? So the first was around the application inquiry reversal. And again, most of the things I'm talking about, I'm taking the time to meet with customers who want these. I've got a backlog of enhancements, but the customers who are using it now, I definitely want to hear from them because they're the ones that are going to give me the features that they're going to use, people are going to use, they're going to get the most value out, and they're going to see that their input is being heard and we're taking action. So what is the application inquiry reversal screen? If you don't know, basically the idea was to reverse payments, prepayments, write-off balances, and credit memos. Now, the way it's been working since the beginning of time is that if I went ahead and I made a payment or a prepayment last period, last quarter, wherever it happens to be, if I decide that I need to reverse it, it's going to do the reversing and make the reversing the current date and the current period. That's the way it's always worked, and some people liked it and some people did not. But the idea behind it is that, yeah, you have to post it. You don't have an option. So the request was made, can you add a checkbox to the system that will allow us to have it post back to the original date of that payment or prepayment and the original period. So it'll offset it back when it originally happened, not having it offsetting it in the period post to the current period and current date. So that functionality was a great idea. It's a simple checkbox that you can choose to turn on or turn off. And again, leave the checkbox off. It works as it does today. Turn it on and it will start using this new way that it's going to post. The next thing is a standard feature, again, that's been around for a while at a very high level, just so you don't have to read. The idea behind it is that I'm inside of a sales order. I'm getting ready to order things. I know I don't have them in stock. So I'm going to place the sales order, but I'm also going to have it automatically generate the purchase order I need to fulfill the sales order and kind of ties them together. So the idea, the way it works is I'm in here, your order type, I go ahead and I click on PO. It will allow me to auto create, which I've already done in this particular screenshot, but I can auto create PO, I can do a drop ship or a manual PO, but it's basically taking the information from the sales order and moving it and copying it so that my PO has all those same items in there. So there is, you can see the purchase for is goods for sales order. That means that there is a link between the two. Maybe you haven't seen this functionality, or you can see it is quite powerful because now you're linking it so that these items will come in and only be used for the sales order. Someone else is not going to grab these items. So basically I was talking to a consultant and they said basically, hey, real small one, but this would really save us a lot of time. Sometimes people, when they come into the purchase orders, they don't know that these are tied and they don't really pay attention to the purchase for, and they might go in there and they decide that, hey, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and just delete this line item because I don't think we need it. Warn them. If they go ahead and they try to delete that line in the sales order and it's already tied to a PO, you are actually cutting the link between the two. Out of the box, it would allow you to do this, but here with CU4, we're going to warn you and say, hey, by the way, you can do what you're about to do, but you're kind of causing problems. Think before you make that delete. So this way, we prompt them. They can go, oh, geez, I didn't realize that. Oh yeah, this is tied to a purchase order. Make the adjustments. Maybe maybe they'll choose to delete it, but then they can go back into the purchase order and know that they need to delete that line off there, or that thing is sitting there waiting to be pulled into the sales order, and it'll never come in. So again, simple solution, great idea, quickly added to address the needs of the customers. The next, service areas, without getting super deep, because this can get very involved. High level, if you do a service areas invoice and you do something incorrect and you want to reverse it, it is not the simplest process today. So the request in speaking with a customer was that, hey, we want a button to be able to do the reverse. And once we get the reversal, we understand we still need to process it to reverse it and take it out. And then add a button to make a copy of that original invoice, so then you can edit it, add things, make edits, and move forward. So that's exactly what we've done. So again, there is a reverse invoice button that's available. Clicking it will prop this up and let you know that's made the reversal. And then also, once you've reversed it and you've released it and you've done the releasing of it, then a new option comes available to say, okay, we saw that you reversed it. I bet you want to make a copy of it so you can start moving forward and making the edits moving forward. So you have both of those buttons now available here in the invoice entry screen. The last, well, I guess there's two things. The next area was around something that we talked about earlier called Power Automate. Again, Power Automate was that automatic email notifications that things need your approval. We did the same thing here, and it's not an approval process, but it's the same idea. We are automatically can email you in one, hey, by the way, you can set this up whenever you want it to go out, maybe every Thursday at 5 or Friday at noon. You want to automatically send an email out to those people that are supposed to be doing their time enters to let them know, oh, by the way, you need to have this done by the end of the day or whatever your timing is. The next is missing time cards. If you are a company that you need to start doing your time card by a certain day, whether you're daily or maybe you want to make sure that everyone has started their time card by Thursday, you can automatically send them out an email, let them know that, hey, we see that you haven't started your time card. Please start it as soon as possible. Your time card got approved. The one on the right is a really neat one I like because it gives a manager a real high-level view of what's going on. So in this case, we can see no one started their time card, but if they have completed their time card, we'd see who's completed it. We see who it's still in process. They at least have been starting it. So it's a great little report. Now, if you're familiar with it, these are all based off some functionality inside of SL, which is a screen, but this is, we automate it. We automatically can send these out to you so you can see what's going on. And we've got tons of different Power Automate emails that we come with. And again, as we said before, these are completely customizable. These are great places to start. You can actually edit them, use them for whatever purposes you need. So it's a really great feature. So next is Power BI dashboards. You probably heard me talk about the project dashboards forever. In the last two releases, we had a customer dashboard and a vendor dashboard added. So with the customer one, we initially came out with one and added some more graphical values to it. So your ability to quickly see what your top customers, you can see the graph grows based on the size that they have, so you can still quickly see who has the most. We also have the ability to look at the customers by sales, see who has the most sales that we have out there, looking at the top 10 documents by sales, looking up to look at the customer class balances by year. So if you've used the customer class type of idea, you can see the multiple classes that are out here. You can see the top document balances by the customers that are out there. You can look at an AR aging as well as aging for the customer and documents that are out there. And last but not least, you can look at the sales details. So you can take a look at the customer sales by year and be able to drill down into the details of exactly where the customers were and what those total amounts were. So free, available to you. You can download Power BI, get the free version, install it, download these, install them, and start taking advantage of them, and then start working with your with your partners like SIS to customize it to make it look and add the features that you need. Same thing with our vendor dashboard. That is new for CU4. That was where we went ahead and added all the similar ideas, but again, we're just looking at vendors, and I'll kind of scoot through here just because I want to give you guys time to ask questions. So finally, Jeff, after all this time, let's get to CU5. Well, I'm not going to lie, CU5 was a lot about year-end updates, and we'll talk about those in a second, but let's highlight some of the small items that we were able to kind of fit in. One was around the payment application screen. Basically, the request was, you have all these other ways to sort things, due date, reference number, doc type. We want to actually be able to do doc date descending and doc date ascending. Again, the little buttons on the top don't quite do it. Give us a little drop down box. So that's exactly what we did. When you open up the screen, based on what your settings are, obviously, if you set that up to be doc date ascending, it'll show your doc dates in that order, or you can click on the radio button above and automatically updates. Again, a small ask, but an ask that made sense. It's making it easier for us to find things to apply against. You might always want to do things in a descending. You know, that's probably what you probably always want to do, hit the latest things, or always address it to the oldest things. Whatever your way is working, we now have a quick way for you to get those documents. Another one was around the invoice print. We talked about earlier what we did. What we've done here is in the header is now we have a new way to figure out exactly what we want to print. We can do it by billing project manager and approver. So we can choose who the billing project manager is, not just the biller, and we can help narrow down exactly which invoice. And then you'll notice that the screen has a little bit of a different layout just because it got so big with all the things that we added. We also redesigned it to make it much easier for the end users to look at and interact with. So we had that with preliminary as well as final as well. So as I said, the big thing, to be honest with you, with CU5 was the year-end maintenance. So there was some additions that we made to the screen. So here's a screenshot of the 1099 vendor maintenance. Again, the year-end items are built into CU5. If you're on 2018, any early versions, there's also the ability to download from Microsoft the same updates that will apply to any version. But please take note, it is different. It's all one package, but you install certain things for 2018 versus CU1, CU2, CU3 versus CU4. So there are very good instructions that explain to you, and definitely why you want to work with SIS if you need to apply those year-end updates. They have the expertise in that. But the thing to notice here is that there were some changes made around, and what we did is 1M is now 1099 MIS. This is a 1099 NEC. 1099 MIS, 1099 MIS, 1099 NEC, and MIS file. So the big thing that we added, and I think I'll show you here in a second, I'll jump ahead, is that there is a new report. Along with having the 1099 MIS, there's also the 1099 NEC, or non-employee compensation. That report has been added to the product as well as to the year-end updates. All those new options here for the drop-down box, you'll see that the way it's been set up, some of them are shared between the MIS and the NEC product, some are not. And then you'll see on the drop-down boxes, again, that same bit of information is available to you, and your voucher and adjustment entry as well. So the same thing with our reporting, obviously the ability to look at the preview as well as the final versions of that. Now, along with this as well, we've also added the ability that when you're using your generate 1099 electronic file, you have the ability to do a 1099 MIS or 1099 NEC as well. So we've, along with doing those things, we've extended it out so that you can also do it with your electronic filing as well. Other things, in the employee maintenance screen, there is a new set of marital statuses that you'll see listed here. So there's head of household with higher withholdings, there's married with higher withholdings, single with higher withholdings. So I'm not going to go into details with this, but know that all the things that you need to be set up are available here inside the employee maintenance. You also have it set up now. One of the things that last year you could not do this for the states it was not supported, but now you have the ability to use these whole higher withholdings for head of household, married, and single are now supported by the states as well, which was a new thing that was added this year, and we've updated the code here in the deduction maintenance so it also supports that as well. All right, the next was kind of as we were prepping to do a lot of the year-end updates, which you might look and go, well, that wasn't much, but it's fun to work with the government. There's lots of things that we had to change and do around the back end. So while we were, I wouldn't say waiting, but while we had a bunch of fixes that have been sitting out there for years. And what I did is I went to the support team and I said, what are some of the fixes that you're always having to give out? Because you found the fix to go around it. Someone figured it out at one time, but for some reason or another, it never got rolled into the core product. So I kind of took it on myself, and there's some that'll be coming out here in CU6 as well. As I said, let's get rid of those. Let's get rid of these things that you still have to disseminate. Let's put it into the core product so you don't have to disseminate something that we all know how to fix. Someone took the time to fix it. Someone came up with the workaround or what needed to be fixed. Why are we holding it? So let's go ahead, and I'm not going to go through any of these, but you can see it's really the financials, cash manager, payroll, some project items, inventory items, inventory replenishment. Wow, that's a blast. Order management, purchasing, requisition, service dispatch. Whole bunch of areas. There is actually a detailed list inside, obviously, the CU5 release with all the details of what changed in here. If you go out to customer source, you'll see a similar list as well, a quick query and some system changes as well. So that's what I wanted to go through while one team was kind of working on the year-end updates. I said, let's not, since we don't know where all these impacts are going to be, let's really focus on getting some of these things that we know work into the core product. And I thought that was a great use of time and a great way to get some of these things that have been sitting out there out into your hands, so you didn't need to come back to us. And last but not least, that's CU5. So we are in the midst of CU6. It's going to be new features. We are now in the process of researching several new features that we're going to add here in CU6. Some will go on to CU7s because there's some smaller and bigger ones, but also we'll be addressing any hot fixes or anything as well. So that's, you're kind of getting our cadence. I really, really would like to hear from you, and it's not a beg, but it is a real big ask. Speak to Dan, speak to anybody at SIS. Say, hey, listen, here's an area. It's not a, it's an item that we constantly have to struggle with, or it's not horrible, but it would really make our lives better if we could. I'm always looking for those. So please contact Dan, contact anybody at SIS that you work with. Let me know what those things are. Those are the things that, to me, bring value to you right away. And then it also makes you see the value of upgrading to these new releases. Now, the nice thing that we've been doing with all these cumulative updates is that if you're on CU2 and you see CU3 and you go, nothing, you see CU4, you go, ooh, like it. These are built to be deployed on top of each other, so you don't need to uninstall, rip everything out and so forth. These kind of build on top of each other, and that's done purposely because we want you to be able to roll out the ones that make the most sense to you. All right, so I'm getting excited about that. So definitely reach out. We'd love to hear it. Just as a last kind of final thing, one, Power Platform. You've heard me talk about Power BI, Power Automate, Power Apps. To me, these are the biggest game changers here in the last several years. These are features that are going to make your lives much easier. If you're remote like myself, these are things that can be accessed remotely, giving more people access to the things they need wherever they're at. Definitely talk to Dan and the team at SIS to understand where these things. We purposely, almost every release, we're putting in a new version of features that use these functionalities. Take a look at them. Get a demo of them. You can install them into your system, see what they can do for you. We see these as starting points. They're not going to do everything that you want it to do, but we're going to do a lot of the stuff that's going to make you think, hey, I'd love to be able to do that. Hey, can I have an app that does this? Sure. Can I have a Power Automate that automatically notifies me this? Sure. Can I get a report that shows me and allows me to analyze this stuff at a high level? Yes. So that's the real goal of where these things are, and I really encourage you to reach out on those. Other items just to remind you of our web apps is our remote access to Dynamics SL. Obviously focused a lot initially on the project areas. We basically put out a new one approximately once a month. Some are addressing any issues that come up, but a lot of them are starting to address new feature requests that we get from customers as well. As a real high level, if you are a project user, one of the common requests we get is that I would like to make sure that no one can submit a time card without putting 40 hours. So you can actually specify in the web apps that in the setup screens, yep, no one can submit the time if the time does not equal 40 or 30 or 45, whatever you happen to have. You set the value, now web apps start doing it. The rich client doesn't know anything about it, but the web apps is where most people are doing their time entry. We can control that, and we're continuing to enhance. And we've got a couple items that are going to be coming out here in the next several months that are similar to that type of idea, adding more functionality to the web, to the time, expense entry of what people need. So again, definitely if you haven't seen web apps and you need something, any from time entry, expense entry, requisitioning, remote access to run all your reports, remote access to run web apps, quick queries, you have all that functionality. And our roadmap, everyone wants to know the roadmap. You can see, hey, this looks very familiar. So the goal here is, you can see in the past 3 years, we've come out with 2 releases. There's nothing changing that this year. It generically says ongoing development, but we're in the middle of working on CU6 and coming up with new features for CU6 and CU7. So again, that is our goal, is to continue to move forward. Now, if you're not on the latest version of SL 28 up in 2018, we definitely look forward to you coming up here to get a chance to start taking advantage of these new features and functionalities, and making sure that your systems are updated with the latest versions of SQL, the latest versions of Windows Server, the latest versions of Office that we support with all the latest versions of Microsoft Dynamics SL. So with that, I would like to open it up to questions. So Dan, if you want to come back on and let me know if we have any questions out there, or any questions that you might have on what we just seen, so we can go ahead and answer that.
Sounds good, Jeff. Thank you very much for all of that great information. Yes, we do have a few questions here, so I'm going to go down the list.
Okay.
The first one is regarding attachments and notes. Is it possible that attachments and notes can be processed against released or posted transactions, like journal transactions or vouchers and things like that? Because I know whenever you release it, you can't add more notes, you can't change the notes.
Exactly. Great question. So Dan, I would love to get for them, give me those specific scenarios, because that's how the other enhancement came into place, the ability to add attachments to the expense entry screen. So Dan, if that's a great example. So if Dan, if you could get with, I can't see the people's names, if you could get with them and come up with a scenario like, hey, here's the most common places. It's the journal transaction screen. We want it on all statuses. We want it in the header, or we just want the detail. That kind of stuff would be perfect, because that's exactly the stuff that I'm looking for. So Dan, great question out of the box. Obviously not right now, but that is a great example of one that I'd love to add once I get your kind of the business case from you guys as to where you're seeing it having the most value add.
Yeah.
So thanks so much.
Yeah, sounds good. Yep, that one's on my list, and with everything I send you, I always give you a business case. So we're going to be fighting hard for our customers to get these things in. So
Always.
That's a good one. I agree.
I like that one.
The next one is, can you add, this from Rosemary, can you add labor class option to the resource assignment? So I'm assuming that labor class is not there, and have a pre-built time card. So I'm assuming that has to do with the add scheduled tasks button whenever you create time cards. I'm going to try and answer this one myself. So if the labor class is not there and it's not moving over, we can of course ask Jeff to ask his team to add that. But we at SIS, we can help you probably do that through a SQL trigger or something like that, that can take maybe some of the data that is not sitting over in the resource assignment and get it over into the pre-filled time cards like you're looking for. That's our answer. Jeff, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I'd like to, if you can give me more information on that, I'd love to do that. Yep.
Okay, so we'll add that one to the list as well. But I think we may have something that we can do if Microsoft doesn't get that one in.
Okay.
So
I see a couple seconds. I'm actually now seeing the question.
Yeah.
So the more details that you give to Dan and team, and then the more we can start talking about it. And if we need to set up a call, I'd love to jump on it and we can talk about the details around that.
Sounds good. Okay, here's another. This is a good one. I have a question too. Since you mentioned CU6 and CU7 on the roadmap, does that mean that we're going to be on SL 2018 for a while, or what's it looking for an SL 2021 or 2022? When's Microsoft going to make that big decision to launch a major version change?
Sure. Good question. So it's a really good question. In the Dynamics world, the new versioning idea is like, for example, in the GP world, there is no new named version. They're kind of changing it to just having a version and continuing to update it. Now, they continue to add new feature functionality. Technically, that's exactly what we're doing as well. We are still using the moniker of 2018. I don't see any changes or announcements in the near future. Obviously, I'm waiting for Microsoft's decisions on that. But right now, the plan is that 2018 is going to be, even though it's 2018, it's just the moniker. This happens to be called 2018. It's SL, and we're going to kind of go through this 2-a-year release cycle to continue to add feature and functionality on top of that. So no additional notes or information out there at this time, but obviously as soon as we hear anything different, we'll let everybody know.
That sounds awesome. Okay, thanks, Jeff. Do you have time for one more?
Of course, of course.
Okay, this one's from Lisa. Hi, Lisa. For 1099s, do we have to go into the vendor and change it from MISC to NEC? Is that a vendor change?
Geez, let me go back to that screen. Of course, you're going to ask me a really good question that I don't have the notes for. If we go back to that screen real quick. So inside of here, there we go. The only thing that you would have to change is if you wanted, the only difference that would be these two here. The rest of them all are sharing. So I think the only change that you might have to do is if they're going to be changed from 1M to 1N. I think that's the only only place where you would have to make that change. Double check with Dan and team, because I would want them to verify this with me, but from my understanding that this is the only real change. A lot of these are being shared, so you don't need to do that there, but they definitely check with Dan and team on that.
Yeah, and Lisa, if you can see what Jeff is showing up in the top of this vendor screen, there is a drop-down box that says default 1099 box number, which I believe you can choose between 1099 NEC or MISC.
You can.
So it is at the vendor level. Okay, well, I think that's all we have for questions. Thanks for sticking around for a couple extra minutes, Jeff. Thank you, everybody, for attending this. I hope we got a lot of good information in your heads. And if you are not on Dynamics SL 2018, please give us a call. We have done a lot of upgrades, and we have a lot of happy customers on that product. And of course, if you're there, you're fully supported by Microsoft. So I'm going to go ahead and end the session. I want to tell everybody thank you again. Have a great day, and we will talk to everybody next month for our next Education Series webinar. Thank you.